through all these indicators, macro indicators, because they are the signs, the vital signs for assessing the health of an economy. This government has been the most anti-business in our history. Every day we are seeing businesses from cement makers to IT companies, and especially those in the energy sector, shutting up shop or shipping out elsewhere. Today, even Unipet is reported to be taking their money out to invest in Ghana. Investors are taking their money out of Trinidad and Tobago at an alarming rate because they have no confidence in this government and their half-baked economic plans. Under this government, our total net FDI from 2016 to 2020 is, guess what? Minus, madam. Minus $11.7 billion. Negative, minus. This is almost $12 billion wide pothole in our road to recovery. And here's another stubborn fact. Under the government I led, Trinidad and Tobago attracted amongst the highest FDI into the country, 7.1 billion US, 48.3 billion TT dollars. This same government is responsible for our country losing almost TT $10 billion in foreign direct investment in just 5 years. So COVID is not chasing away the investors, you know. They're being chased away by the Rowley-led government. I want to look now at our rainy day fund, our legacy fund, our sovereign wealth fund, the HSF. When this government came into office in 2015, they could not wait to get their hands on our precious heritage and civilization fund. That fund is our legacy for the next generation. It is our rainy day fund, as I said. And yes, COVID brought some harsh downpours, but long before 2020, this government closed the umbrella on this nation, long before COVID. It is a matter of record. The last time the HSF had monies put into it, it was under a government I led. We saved money in the HSF. This government was in power 5 years before COVID hit last year. They did not put one red cent or one black cent in the HSF, not one. Instead, they raided the rainy day fund. And by the way, you know, I heard the Prime Minister say recently that the HSF was created by the PNM. Let me tell the Prime Minister that the PNM did not create the HSF. The brightest economic policy the PNM ever had was to give away a free LED bulb, a light bulb. The minister went into great detail on how the IMF works, but apparently he probably needs to let the Prime Minister know how the HSF works. The HSF was conceived and created under the Pandey government. Indeed, every point of economic progress this country has ever experienced was done by a UNC government, dollar for dollar. Dollar for dollar, education for all, water for all. Guess what? We were known as the box train government. But you see, if you had kept on that program, all this flooding you're having all over the country may not have come to pass. But I see somewhere, you know, I see somewhere in all these documents and reports now talking about box trains, I'm saying the progress under the UNC government. And when I said this HSF, it was created under the Pandey government, and all the PNM did was to change the name of the fund. And you know what? It took them 6 years to change the name. 6 years to change the name to HSF. It was the Interim Revenue Stabilization Fund created by the Pandey government in 2000. That is what became new name, HSF, in 2007. Here's another fact. No other government has withdrawn from the HSF other than this long-eyed government. No other government. No other government. In June 2016, they withdrew US $375 million. That is about 2.5 billion TT. There was no COVID then. In 2017, they took out 1.7 billion TT. There was no COVID then. In 2020, they took out 6.65 billion. No COVID then. And this is, I'm talking about billion and not million, billion, as Arnold Roberts says, billions. Billions. That is over 225 million TT every month since they've been in office. In total, this government has gone into the HSF 12 times since coming into office. And they will keep going back. They'll keep going back because they're like hustlers, you know, in some ways. They'll keep going back 12 times. In this year alone, as I said, several times they've gone into the fund. Here is another stubborn fact, madam. It was the government I led that deposited US $1.18 billion. Billion dollars. That is US, and on the TT side, $8 billion. $8 billion. $8 billion, $21 million we deposited in our term in office. Under my leadership, the HSF grew by 17.5 billion TT. Under this government, on the other hand, they have withdrawn TT 16.3 billion. 16.3. We deposited in that 17.5. They nearly take out all that we had left there and saved. 16.3 billion they took out. We grew the fund by 17 plus billion. And as I said already, they rated it by 16 plus billion. All the money we saved, they have spent. What do you have to show for it? Where has the money gone? Where has all this money gone? COVID is not raiding the HSF. It is a Rowley-led P&M that is doing that. I turn now, madam, to look at what I see as a frightening situation in our country. That is the erosion of independent institutions. The erosion of independent institutions. The minister spoke in his statement, the minister spoke about strengthening institutions, when in fact this government has had a sustained assault on the independent institutions of our country. The minister mentioned the central bank in that category. But let us take a look at what is happening at the central bank. What have they done? They have installed a compliant and obedient governor, transforming the once robust central bank into a subdivision of the Ministry of Finance. They amended the Central Bank Act to allow the Minister of Finance to access confidential information on any employee at the bank. They reduced the term of the governor to ensure that he will be their puppet. This brazen act meant to intimidate and control the bank was widely condemned by every single former governor of the bank, with the exception of one Ewart Williams. I think he's the minister's advisor, if I'm not mistaken. He was the only one who stayed silent on this matter. The Citron Central Bank governor, however, did what his masters told him, and he said nothing. Last week I saw a newspaper editorial that said there needs to be transparency in our forex distribution. Well, when the previous bank governor disclosed the largest consumers of this country's forex, many of whom are again friends and financiers and family of the P&M government, they fired him. They fired him. Fired him. Persecuted him for years after. This is just one example of the way the government is assaulting our institutions. We see a similar assault on the independence of the EBC, on the Police Service Commission, the Office of the Procurement Regulator, the proposed TTRA to really an assault on the independent BIR. What they are doing is breaking down institutions which they're now claiming they want to protect and serve. I turn now to another institution the minister mentioned in his statement, the TTRA, the Trinidad and Tobago Revenue Authority. Minister boldly announced that the government will move towards the implementation of a TTRA. The government indicated that this is to ensure the efficient collection of taxes from citizens. The minister spent millions to set up that TTRA to ensure that he can go into the pockets of citizens to collect taxes in this guava season. But he would not find sufficient money to help people. This bill came to the Parliament many incarnations. In 2010, twice in 2018, once in 2019, All those versions of the bill to establish the TTRA contain a 3/5 special majority clause. Save and accept the 2021 TTRA bill, which is currently on the order paper of this House, which was passed in the Senate with a simple majority. The Attorney General and Cabinet have a passion for removing constitutional majority and railroading their way in an undemocratic manner through the Parliament. That TTRA bill interferes significantly with property rights and privacy rights protected by sections 4 and 5 of the Constitution, but no special majority clause. They removed it. It is my considered view that the bill, if passed without a special majority, it will come here. If it's passed without us, it will be unconstitutional, and we will challenge it in the courts. We will challenge it. This TTRA is in effect the Minister's Revenue Authority. There is no independence in the provisions that are laid out in the bill to the authority or the Board of Management. There is no independence because the Minister and or Cabinet has total control over the appointment of the Board, Director General, and employees of the TTRA. The Minister announced that he would pick out, he get 100 tax army, 100 persons. What happened to the last time you said you would bring out an army of tax collectors and tax compliance officers? What happened to them? Were they ever hired? Where is the independence of the TTRA? Minister Imbert has inserted himself in the entire TTRA, which is supposed to be an independent body such as it is with the BIR. We have seen when there is political interference in independent institutions, they crash. Just look at the police service. Look at the Police Service Commission, which I turn to now. I am aware that there are several court actions regarding, firstly, the interpretation of the 2021 order in relation to the appointment and selection of a Commissioner of Police. That has now been expanded to include an interpretation of the 2009 order, which deals with acting appointments. This was introduced by the AG, who apparently is now confessing that he needs the help of the court to read and understand the legislation that he drafted and brought here. There is also a court matter challenging certain decisions made by the now defunct Police Service Commission. Madam, I do not intend to speak on these matters as they pertain to the court proceedings. However, we cannot entirely ignore the elephant in the room. Our state of national insecurity is made even more glaring as a result of this debacle surrounding the appointment of a cop and the complete implosion of the Police Service Commission due to the reckless, incompetent, and deliberate political interference in our independent institutions and processes by high public officials. Based on what is reported in the media, madam, we may very well find ourselves without a Commissioner of Police or even an acting Commissioner of Police come October 15. That is when the appointment of the present acting, Mr. Jacob, ends. The Prime Minister and other members of the Cabinet have accepted that the proper procedure was not followed in the appointment of one of the acting commissioners. This is the second time that this AG has attempted to interfere with the process of selecting and appointing a Commissioner of Police. And both times, litigation had to be commenced. The first time, they attempted to insert the Minister of National Security into the process, and the court struck out those offending parts, saying that they were interfering with the independence of the Police Service Commission. They have returned this year, and instead of inserting a minister into the process via the order, someone inserted themselves physically into the process by appearing in the President's house to exert influence. And I call upon the government, I call on the Prime Minister to tell us, who is that high official? Who is that official? Why is this relevant to the budget? Well, for one, the allocation to the TTPS has to be managed by the COP. He is the Chief Accounting Officer. Without a COP or acting COP, who will be accountable for expenditure in this allocation? Whom? Additionally, the incompetence of the AG continues to cost taxpayers millions of dollars. Legal fees, legal opinions, and costs ordered by the court, all of which you, the taxpayer, must bear, and which could be avoided if we had a more competent Attorney General. This money could have been better spent on resources for the TTPS to fight crime. We have witnessed an unprecedented constitutional crisis which demands absolute transparency. In this regard, I wish to state that I have written to Her Excellency the President a letter that has been signed by all 19 UNC MPs calling on Her Excellency to provide much needed answers to a series of questions when it comes to the Police Service Commission. Saddam. Just sit for a minute. I turn now to the Integrity Commission. In this budget, allocation is made for the Integrity Commission. We all know we are persons in public life, and as persons in public life, by law, we are compelled to declare assets to the Integrity Commission. Now, the Form B, we cannot see a person in public life. We cannot see the Form A declaration, but we are allowed to examine the Form B at the Integrity Commission that any public person has filed. We learned recently of an individual who sold a Porsche SUV to their friends but did not transfer it. That is apparently in breach of the law. Additionally, if such a person in public life fails to declare any sale of any assets, he is also in breach of the law. Based on the records in the Integrity Commission, a person in public life sold a vehicle, a Porsche, in 2016 and failed to disclose the sale to the Integrity Commission in 2017, in 2018, in 2019, in 2020. Failed in breach of the law. Madam Speaker, only in 2021, after a marked bust, as people say, was the sale declared by way of a letter dated in February 2021. Why did it take 5 years to disclose the sale? Why? In breach of the law. What were you hiding? Is the Integrity Commission under-resourced to detect these matters? Government has slashed the recurrent expenditure to the Integrity Commission, where when we were there in 2015 was 16.6 million allocated. They've slashed it by half, by 50%, down to 8.3 million in this budget, 8.3 million. And so there we are. This matter, we deserve an explanation. Why you would take how many years? 5 years or something? To comply with the Integrity in Public Law Act. I turn now to another matter that is cause for concern for everyone, and not just for UNC opposition members, or not just for trade unionists, not just for journalists, every person in public life. I want the government to answer if they have contracted an Israeli company to gather information and intercept people's private phones and their emails and so on. A whistleblower has indicated that there are members of the government who has made contact with this Israeli company to intercept phones, emails, and other communications. Now, I raise this because it's not just opposition people in this matter. This is dangerous to our democracy. The PNM in a previous incarnation abused the national security apparatus. To spy on private citizens and political opponents. And at that time, that PNM government, they were spying on some of their own members. Spying on some of their own members. That is why we came, when we went into government, when all those records came to us, we said, we came here and we changed the law, madam. But then when you put compliant persons, this is where you don't have the independence of office, then you go to them as your puppet and you tell them, do that, intercept these phones. And that's what's been happening with the breakdown of our independent institutions. This is dangerous, Madam Speaker. They may be even, I don't want to involve you in the debate, but in the last incarnation, even the president's phone was being hacked. The then president's phone was being hacked. I call on the Prime Minister, as head of National Security Council, to clear the air. Now, Madam, there was a report some time ago, in the middle of the lockdown when our borders were closed, that certain a number of Israeli persons had landed in Trinidad and Tobago. What they would, and that's in the lockdown, when borders were closed and people couldn't come in. The Israelis landed here at the airport. And when we asked, what were they doing here? What did they come here to do? I'm still asking, is it true that they are still here? Is it true that they're not dealing with the radar? And is it true that it might be dealing with all these illegal intercepts as well and hacking into people's private phones? I think the government must come clear on this matter. I turn now to the property tax. I dreaded property tax. The ministers included property tax under which section? Building institutions. Since when property tax is an institution? Maybe the minister can enlighten me in his winding up. I don't know if this is another typo. I don't know. But property tax, I'm aware, is not an institution. According to the law, property tax collection can begin after 50% of all lands in TNT have been valued. This means 50% of all residential, commercial, agricultural, industrial lands.
I beg your pardon, 53(1)(e), please. I'm hearing a lot of crosstalk from across the floor.
And the crosstalk is on both sides. So I ask all members, let's listen to the member for Superior, Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So that means that 50% of all these lands have to be valued, have to be valued in order for the tax to be implemented. Today, the minister cannot tell us the total number of properties in TNT. Minister reported the 127,969 valuation return forms were submitted. So, well, Mr. Minister, does that take us to the 50% mark or doesn't it? How much is it of those forms? And you're actually pursuing valuations in certain areas and constituencies so that the assessment role would be completed sooner in those areas and taxes collected there first. Is that what is happening? Is this geographic discrimination? Is this valuation apartheid? These are concerns that citizens have. Will this tax be rolled out equitably? Persons today are struggling to keep a roof over their heads, paying mortgage or rent for an apartment to live in. Some are being served eviction letters. They have no money to buy food and devices for their children, but the minister wants them to pay property tax or higher rents, which would come as a natural consequence of the property tax. Again, I say this is war on the people of Trinidad and Tobago at this time. Under this draconian law, if you fail to submit the valuation forms by 30th November, you shall be liable to pay a $5,000 fine. That is a criminal offense. So you can be dragged before a magistrate's court, you can be fined as $5,000 for failure to submit the form, and you will have a criminal record entered against you. All because this government wants your money. They told us that, we want your money. Again, this is war on the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Further, based on the law, a valuation tribunal should be established in the event someone objects to the evaluation. I ask the question, where is that tribunal? I have seen some say that the tax will benefit the community you live in. That is not true. That is not true. That is totally untrue, that it will benefit your community. In other countries, when property tax is collected by local government bodies, it goes towards fixing roads, drains, garbage collection, etc., in your community. However, in TNT, all the property tax will go into the consolidated fund. This means it will go towards $1 million renters, $1 million indemnifications in the pockets of family and friends of the recusal twins. It is heartless for the government to implement a new tax regime based on what a home could be rented for when most people cannot even pay rent in today's world in Trinidad. Many homes cannot be rented because of the state of the roads, the flooding, unreliable water supplies. I know there is at least one member of this government who should agree with me. I want to read a statement, Madam, made in this House in 2009, and I quote, "Presently in my constituency, there is anxiety at both ends of the spectrum. There is anger at both sides of the spectrum, and there is resentment on both sides. And I will tell you why. People are seeing this as a situation that ought not to have that should not have been. If you accept my argument, or my understanding, that it is really a revenue-raising measure, and anything else is disingenuous, then people are saying, had we handled our largesse differently, we probably would not have had to resort to this measure. That's the property tax, in reference to the property tax. The member who made that statement was none other than a member for Dago Martin West. None other. Mr. Prime Minister, through you, madam, I call upon you to heed your own words and stop the property tax now. Heed your own words. The member rejected the claim that property tax is a revenue, When we now have this Minister of Finance saying this will be a significant tax-raising revenue measure. This Minister of Finance, significant tax-raising revenue measure. With such strong views on this tax, coming from the Prime Minister himself, it is obvious that the property tax is being collected now to compensate for all the bad spending and squandermania that has occurred. In 2009, when the country was better off economically than now, the member for Dago Martin West told the then government, and I quote, again, if you try to defend the indefensible, you will create resentment and provoke people, and that is what we have at the moment. I know a lot of people for whom $100 is a lot of money. A lot are struggling to make ends meet, end of quote, member for Dago Martin West. Again, I call upon the Prime Minister, do not be a hypocrite. And if you need man, order your Minister of Finance to stop the property tax now. This is an area of the budget, procurement, which was easily predictable. Every year since 2015, every year, minister like a broken record will repeat, Procurement Act will be fully proclaimed. It was repeated in 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019, 2020, 2021, and again now for 2022 budget. The law is languishing on the law books. When my government demitted office, we had introduced and passed this act, which aimed to increase integrity, transparency, and accountability. Then they came to amend that act and gutted the act. They took away the powers of the procurement regulator, stripped some of those powers, thereby creating possible corridors for corruption. They have managed to manipulate the Procurement Act to facilitate corruption. This is how they did it. This is how they did it. They removed, one, the procurement office from disposing, selling property owned by the state. This means there will be no transparency with respect to the sale of any property owned by the state. Petrotrin, the port, anything else, all these hotel places you want to give them, there will be no transparency and integrity, transparency. They gifted billion-dollar state assets to friends and family and financiers. I'm asking. Some of the members of the cabinet can't even sell a Porsche properly, but they want to sell our national patrimony. They removed government-to-government transactions and public-private partnerships from scrutiny, and yet you're coming here to boast about more, the three Ps as you call it, public-private partnerships, and engaging in these government transactions, government-to-government. How many public partnerships have we heard that the minister has announced in the hotel building and housing sector? 5 hotels. 5 hotels. Where will be the transparency? They remove from legal scrutiny, financial scrutiny, auditing and accounting and medical services. So they remove legal fees, remember? Financial fees. Because somebody has a bank and so on, brokering financial deals. They remove legal fees. They remove accounting. They remove medical services. I think somebody has some MRI place somewhere with medical services too. The removal of legal fees is particularly disconcerting. given the recent shocking revelations concerning payment of legal fees. I call upon the Minister of Finance to revert to the original law, which allowed for proper independent scrutiny of government contracts and disposal of sale of assets. It appears that this Rowley-led government wants power without accountability or transparency. A UNC government will restore transparency and accountability and rebuild trust. Then we've seen the spectacle of the gutting of special majority legislation. I mentioned one, which was the TTRA. The government is no respecter of law nor man, especially if you're a normal, ordinary man. Even the sacred duty of lawmaking is a puppy show for this government, an act of political malfeasance and sacrilege. This government is openly assaulting our democracy and violating our constitution. Every time they bring critical legislation to this parliament, affecting fundamental rights and freedoms, they take out the three-fifths majority to pass laws in breach of enshrined fundamental rights. They have done it recently with the TTRA bill, as I said, up in the Senate. They did it with the Gambling, Gaming and Betting Control Act. They did it with the Evidence Amendment Act No. 1. They did it with the Procurement Amendment Act 2020. They did it with the Income Tax Amendment Act. And I can go on and on, the Interception of Communications Act, the Anti-Gang Amendment Act, gutting those out, taking out the special majority. And that special majority was placed there by our Constitution forefathers for a reason. It was placed there for a reason. To provide enshrined protections for the fundamental rights of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. That's why it was there. So it's no simple thing because you want to pass a law and we'll go to court and challenge it if you want to go to court. And when you go to court, it will be struck down, I tell you. The embattled AG and this cabinet, excuse me, continue to use Surat to undermine citizens' rights and pass bad law. They make laws for their own profits. Now, Madam, there's another very startling matter in the public domain. Sadly, our republic has had its experiences of political power being used to target political adversaries. History will demonstrate when incidents such as these arise, there are two factors. Such acts have always been perpetrated by the PNM and its agents, and they have always been aimed at undermining the rule of law and our democratic institutions. Though we may have come to expect this kind of behavior from the PNM, the latest revelations that are now in the public domain are unprecedented, troubling, and strikes at the very core of our democracy. As the leader of the opposition, Madam, I consider it my duty to raise these matters in the public interest. But I am mindful of the fact that these alarming revelations relate to matters before the court, and I will be most circumspect and balanced in my comments, not to offend the subjudice rule. I will refer only to information in the public domain and ask questions of the government on behalf of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Whilst we are all preoccupied with the budget, we must not lose sight of events which impact our democracy and the rule of law. There can be no economic prosperity and development if we destroy the rule of law. On Monday last, in the aftermath of the tragedy they call a budget, I said that we would write international agencies and authorities on matters involving a foreign national. Today, I state that yesterday I sent off a letter I'd written to one Suella Braverman, QC, MP, Attorney General for England and Wales, with respect to a British citizen involved in a secret agreement with a high public official, and I have received an acknowledgement of this letter. I want to turn to another point, and this has to do with what appears to be a government for friends, family, and finances. The minister themed his budget as resilience in the face of a pandemic. And as mentioned it before, while hundreds of thousands of people are suffering, there are those who have done quite well for themselves under this government, the friends, the family, and the finances. It would be remiss of me not to turn attention to perhaps one of the biggest jobs on this nation by someone who ironically is supposed to be the guardian of the public's interest. How could we forget the himself-to-himself arrangement taxpayers are paying for? Trinidad and Tobago has to be the only democratic country in the world where a senior government minister can be a direct beneficiary of a government rental agreement. It seems like there is stiff competition in the PNM camp for the position of Minister of Everything, because in this arrangement, the Attorney General, as a member of the government, is a tenant as well as a landlord. This is absolutely outrageous. Can you imagine, while citizens of our country are lining up fighting to receive $1,500 income support, $1,000 rent support, most of them are still waiting in despondence. The government of Trinidad and Tobago is comfortably paying in excess of 23 million in rent to the Attorney General's family. It is mind-boggling to believe that this is happening, and they have no problem with that. I don't know if they generally believe this is not a serious conflict of interest. They do not believe it is not unethical, or they know very well that it is wrong, but they'll do it anyway. Quite frankly, I don't know which is worse. 4 buildings. 4 buildings. That's how many buildings are being rented from the family of the Attorney General. At least that's about how many we know about so far, Madam
Madam Speaker, I rise on a point of order, 53(1)(e). The Attorney General and the Prime Minister's voices is disturbing us from hearing the Leader of Opposition.
Member for Superior, please.
Thank you, Madam. I say 4 buildings, Madam, that we know of are being rented from the family of the Attorney General, the relatives of the Attorney General. So, Madam, when you go to the Ministry of Public Utilities at 1 Alexandra Place to complain about WASA and how you never have water in your taps, or that your street lights have not been working for months, and TNTech doesn't seem too bothered by it, you should know that the government is paying $600,000 a month to relatives of the Attorney General. When you go to the personal department at 3 Alexandra Street to sort out your measly gratuity payment or your contract, you should know that the government is paying $575,000 per month in rent to a company of which the Attorney General is a director. When you go to the Ministry of Social Development and Family Services at 45A and C, 45A, 45C, St. Vincent Street, Port of Spain, and you cannot access government assistance, or you cannot get your salary relief grant of your $1,500 or your rental support grant, you should know that the government is paying $159,000 per month to relatives of the Attorney General. And when you go to the TTPS at the corner of Agra Street in St. James, you cannot get your certificate of character to put for your job application. You call and they have no vehicles to respond to emergency, or you don't feel safe in your communities because the TTPS is under-resourced. You should know that the government is paying $356,000 per month to relatives of the Attorney General. But when you think that's as bad as it gets, from the landlord of the nation cometh the mother of all excuses. Excuses? I recuse myself. That has to be an insult to the intelligence of the people of this country. So far as we know, the AG recused himself no less than 37 times from the cabinet room. And then he goes out, dancing left foot to right foot, laughing all the way to the bank. Dancing left foot, right foot, all the way to the bank. It troubles none of them that this is happening. This is how they govern, left foot, right foot, from left hand to right hand, himself for himself. And the people must foot the bills at the end of the day. I turn to another area, ma'am, for concern. This has to do with the successor board to Petrotrin, TPHL. Going against the advice of its own legal team, headed by senior counsel, this board filed no appeal. They filed no application to set aside the matter involved, the arbitration matter, involving the Prime Minister's best friend for allegedly selling Petrotrin $100 million in fake oil. So the Prime Minister's best friend is very resilient. He's doing quite well. As fate would have it, that board is headed by the Prime Minister's personal lawyer. He's also resilient and doing very well. The thousands of ex-Petrotrin workers and families who are now on the breadline are not resilient like that, as the best friend of the Prime Minister. I turn now, madam, to shareholders of I.A.N Resorts, which includes the Minister of Transport. They were lucky enough to see the land at the site of the former K. Drive-In sold for the construction of the Curep interchange. That drive-in, any of you pass by there will know, has been closed for years. The property had been allowed to, run down. I.A.N Resorts, I read a report saying, filed a claim for $18 million from the state, which I'm sure will make their shareholders very resilient. They must certainly be more resilient than the thousands of persons who have lost their jobs and are still waiting on the promised salary relief grants. And we cannot leave this alone, because we'll have to go and look at the young people as well. Can't forget that a relative of Minister Stuart Young, his name is Angus Young, is the CEO of NCB Global Finance, which used to be a very small debt collection company. But incredibly, under this government, NCB Global Finance has done deals with government to the tune of upwards of $2.5 billion taxpayer dollars, all in the space of 5 years, and 37 recusals by Minister Young. Recently, Global Finance even turned into a merchant bank. How resilient they have been. What an incredible achievement in a COVID pandemic, especially when you have at your aid a politician as a brother. I turn now to a matter that the Minister spent a lot of time on, which was the management of the COVID pandemic. And I say that that management was disastrous and continues so to be. The government came to use COVID to cover up their own failures. They even made a ludicrous claim that they acted swiftly and decisively to contain the pandemic. Nothing could be further from the truth. When the history of this pandemic is written, it will not be a story of how the government helped to save lives and livelihoods. It will be a sorry tale, excuse me, madam. When the history is written, it will be a sorry tale about how this government abused health regulations to stifle free speech both inside and outside of this parliament. It will be a story about how public health officials ignored warnings about the pandemic, saying COVID-19 was unlikely to affect us. Right in a committee in this parliament. No, that's not going to come here, the CMOH. No, not going to come here. It will also be about how government officials ignored the pleas to address the pandemic. Then they bungled the vaccination drive, leaving the nation to suffer in chaos and confusion. Let's look at the issue of acting swiftly. Who can forget in January 2020, when we first tried to raise the looming threat of COVID, we were told that it was not urgent enough to warrant a debate. We then turned to the vaccine chaos. They placed our entire nation in jeopardy because of their lazy schemes in procuring life-saving vaccines for our population. So while citizens were falling sick by the hundreds without vaccines, our Prime Minister said that he was too proud to beg for vaccines after his COVAX plan didn't come through. Let's not forget as well the botched rollout of mass vaccination in June. The Minister of Health decided to scrap the appointment system and tell everybody, come, first serve. No appointment, just turn up. From tomorrow, they can just walk in, get vaccinated and go back home. Easy. That was on Tuesday, June. The next day saw the chaos at the nation's health facilities. The Minister of Health put thousands of citizens' lives at risk because he wanted to show off. He wanted to boast. They started this big rollout. But what they were trying to cover up was that they had no vaccine. So people turned up in mass numbers and they had to turn their back. Added to that in the management, we have this propaganda press conference scene going on. This government never treated the pandemic as a public health emergency. For the past year, vital public health information has been dispensed via carefully staged, managed press conferences. Public health officials are made to stand next to the Prime Minister and repeat government talking points. Saturdays have now become the national buffet day, where the Prime Minister addresses the nation to berate and blame the population. Meanwhile, it's the Prime Minister who always had to go into quarantine all the time, either because he got COVID or he was in a primary contact with someone with COVID. But when ordinary citizens get COVID, the Prime Minister berates them. When the Prime Minister himself gets the COVID, he still berates the citizens. I turn as well to the use of the state of emergency. In 3 months of the initial SOE, because of government's incompetence, our vaccine program was a mess. There was no slowdown in the number of cases. Then they came to extend the SOE, giving no data, no rationale, no rhyme or reason for the extension. Now we have this gimmick of safe zones. After a year of attacking businesses and blaming everyone for wanting to make a living, government has now come with their latest gimmick, safe zones. Once again, the AG has presented another piece of legislation that is illogical, poorly conceived, and is bound to fail. These so-called TD safe zones are a conceptual disaster and will be worse in practice. We shudder to think of the chaos that it will cause when implemented. We fear that businesses will fail to even generate enough income to cover operational costs. Functioning at 50% capacity out of a population pool of 42% vaccinated means that only 21% of the population is permitted to patronize these businesses at any point in time. I expect that these chambers and businesses currently supporting the safe zone policy will have to ask for help for it to be discontinued. The following must be considered. Listen. You're saying that no one under the age of 12 will be allowed in a safe zone. And vaccinated people will be expected to show proof along with a form of ID. But children under 12 are not being vaccinated or may not be vaccinated. And if they are under 12, then what is a parent to do? What is a family to do? When you go to any one of these places, what, you leave your children in the car? And therefore, to open family entertainment places like cinemas and water parks makes no sense if children under 12 cannot have access to them. Why? Because there's no proved vaccination for children under 12. So it's a serious matter. What do you expect the parents to do? The obvious answer is that families with children under 12 will not use these safe zones, thus reducing the authorized pool of customers even further. Moreover, this safe zone policy is impractical for hotels. In Tobago, it eliminates any vaccinate to operate benefits, because once again, children under 12 will be denied access because there's no vaccine and they will not be vaccinated. And then there's the issue of unvaccinated employees now have to produce a PCR test every 2 weeks to continue to work. Who pays for this? This contradicts the opinion of the President of the Industrial Court, Deborah Thomas Felix, that terms of employment cannot be arbitrarily changed by an employer. No one in government has answered this question. Clearly, these are unrealistic measures that foster neither health nor economic advantages. I view this safe zone policy as a gimmick. It's meant to help pad the minister's thin budget and it amounts to vaccine apartheid. Relief measures not reaching those in need. I talk about the salary relief grants now. Minister spent a lot of time, a lot of pages on these grants. I have found the more this minister speaks, the more it shows why our country is in crisis. Speaking about the salary relief grant, which falls under his portfolio, the minister boasted to this country that for 2020, a total of 86,924 grants, valued at a total of 143.6 million, have been paid. Well, I checked the yellow books. And let me tell you what I found. According to the estimates of expenditure, and for that year that the minister is talking about, 2020, the actual expenditure for 2020 was not $143 million. So which is it? It was 42.6 million in the yellow books. 42.6 million in the yellow books. So which is it, Minister? Is this another typo? Does this amount to another typo where you say one thing in the statement and then in the estimates it's different? But that's, and again, that's where I come back to the maths, not mathsing. But that's not the only thing. According to the minister for 21, the fiscal year just completed, a total of 8,200 grants valued at 24 million have been paid out in salary relief grants. Again, according to the same books that you supplied with, Minister, us with, there was absolutely no allocation in 2021 for salary relief grant. So where did you get that money from? And how could you spend it without an allocation out of your ministry? So if you took from one head and put it under another within your ministry, it should still be reflected in the yellow book in the estimates under actual and revised expenditure for that year. So is this another typo? Is this another typo? Where did that 24 million come from? And can I say once more? Or can I say further? Do you all know, in those same estimates, no allocation has been made for the upcoming fiscal year 2022. None. None whatsoever for salary relief grants. I say again, in maths, not mathsing. Every year there's some kind of bacchanal with these salary relief grants. Madam, I turn to a very important sector, which is the national security sector. The minister spoke for 3 hours, you told me, and 30-something minutes. And during that time, his statement contained about 26,000 words. And in all of that 26,000 words, 164 pages, 3 hours plus, the minister used the word police once. Once. And that was only in reference to a police youth club distributing hampers. And this at a time when crime is escalating, crime and criminality escalating. The minister paid scant regard for the safety and security of our citizens. Instead of giving us updates and progress reports from the Minister of Finance about national security, we heard a drab repeat of the same proposed measures of yesteryears. In some cases, the minister was satisfied to merely copy and paste the wording of parts of his 2021 speech. And we all know you cannot expect to do, or rather say, the same things over and over and again and expect a different result. You'll end up with the same khaki pants, the same short khaki pants. Last year in the budget, Minister gleefully announced TTPS will give money for the purchase of GPS for police vehicles, CCTV cameras, body cameras and drones. But again, when you look at the estimates, the truth is revealed. They allocated $7 million for mining equipment purchases, but the yellow books show they spent only $0.8 million of that allocation. So you come in the budget and you announce big numbers, but then you don't spend it, you don't disburse it, and this is an area where it's needed, national security. So, 7 million, they spent 0.8 million. Out of the total of 7 million, the minister only released less than $1 million, 0.8. This year, we see another allocation for 6 million for mining equipment, and this may turn out to be another mamagai for the TTPS and the country. You will hear them boast about purchasing vehicles for the police. Again, the estimates reveal the truth. $25 million were allocated in this last fiscal year. Do you know how much was released, madam? $4.1 million. So why are you always consistently overestimating and underestimating? And then not giving the allocations. Why? The minister this year has mentioned the integrated logistics support facility. That is something we heard last year, of course. And you know what is allocated for it? 1.4 million in the last budget, and guess what? Not a single cent of that was spent. Not a single cent. And many of the projects are like that, Madam. I'll tell you, in all these sectors, MPs on this side have shadow portfolios, and they will go into greater depth for each of the ministries and sectors. So they have no achievements. And therefore, what they're doing now, they're claiming to build things that they didn't build. They're claiming that they're going to build things that are already built. And I don't know how the opening of the penal fire station, I was there. And the then Minister Stuart Young, we opened it together. He's no longer National Security, but he then opened it in capacity as Minister of National Security, penal fire station. And I don't know, I don't know how the opening of that station slipped the memory of the member for Port-au-Prince North St. Anne's, Minister Young. I know it slipped his memory. And that was something I'll never forget. It was horrifying. And I don't know how they forgot that and put it back, put it in the budget as to be built. A similar thing is happening with the Roxborough Fire Station. Put back in this budget statement, they're going to build it. The thing built already. Built already. Energy sector, madam. Energy sector. More typos maybe, yeah. I guess those are all typos. With the energy sector, what a sad place we are with our energy sector. Once the energy sector was really our masterpiece, centerpiece, everything else you could think of in that regard. We had one of the oldest oil industries. I remember reading in a book somebody writing up about Petrotrin down there and the flame, some great legacy. I remember that we supplied fuel, madam, during the World War II. It was our energy, ours. We were so great that we were shipping and helping in the war efforts in those days. And now here we are, and I think on last Monday, the minister read the eulogy of the energy sector. 6 years of untruths, thank you. 6 years of untruths, collapse and crisis. When I listened to him, I noticed that unlike previous ministers of finance, he was not reporting on the success of our nation's strongest sector. Instead, what he did, as I said, he read the eulogy for the energy sector. First of all, we have to look at the unrealistic, misleading gas figure. Minister boasted gas production would increase to 3.37 billion standard cubic feet in the next year. Minister, you think that will really happen? The fact is that under your watch, gas production collapsed to its lowest in decades. Lowest in decades. To 2.7 billion standard cubic feet. And then we have the pie in the sky oil production figure. The government has carried oil production to its lowest since 1950s. Since the 1950s. When we left office, oil production was around 80,000 barrels per day. In our last year, your last year, the Rowley-led government, you averaged 57,800 barrels per day. How can we expect for you to achieve 86,000 barrels next year when you have struggled to the last 6 years to even achieve over 70,000 barrels? How are you going to do it? More pie in the sky. For 5 years, the Prime Minister has beaten his chest that he's the nation's best salesman. How can you be the best salesman when our nation has gone from positive FDI flows, foreign direct investment flows, to negative, as I said before, minus 11 point something? How can you be the best salesman? How can you be the best salesman when only last month Exxon announced that it is moving almost all supply work from Trinidad to Ghana? How can that be? How can you be the best salesman when you single-handedly destroyed Point Lisas with your Houston gas negotiations, causing the most plant closures ever in our nation's history, decimating the downstream sector? My person shadowing energy will talk a little more, but I must say that the incentives we introduced during our term were innovative enough that they would have been able to attract and allow companies to exist in the economy of today, even though we'll be facing the competition from Ghana, facing competition from green energy, and facing pandemic shutdown. So we will give you more details of what we would have done. But clearly none of that is happening now, where the company, the Exxon has declared that it will leave. There are also pie-in-the-sky lies, maybe I can't say lies, but untruths about the failures on gas production. So I spoke about the oil production, gas production. In the 2019 budget, Minister, you told our nation that gas production would increase to 4.05 billion standard cubic feet per day in 2020 and 4.14 billion per day in 2021. Due to incompetence, that instead of increasing production, it fell, as I said before, to the lowest level in decades. When we left office, gas production would be 3.8 and 4 billion standard cubic feet. Not once have you managed to surpass the level of gas production that the government I led did. You have spent years talking about the partnership's treatment of NGC, but today I remind this government that NGC never made a loss under my government. We see NGC has recorded a loss. We see NGC has recorded a loss of $2.1 billion. That wasn't COVID. That was not the global economy. It was a poorly negotiated gas prices by this government. Still on the energy sector, we have seen the abuse of the NGC. This is, we've termed it Malcolm Jones 2.0. They criticize the partnership government for using NGC dividends to develop the lives of people of this nation. But once did we ever abuse NGC, as we have been seeing in the last few months. In September, our nation was reminded of the usual everyday vulgar mismanagement by this government when it revealed that the board of NGC had allegedly sought indemnity for the decision to spend $440 million on the Atlantic Trade One turnaround. What is really going on at NGC? How can a government and cabinet, which has boasted about value for money, allow this wastage of taxpayers' money at a time when we are struggling for revenue? Prime Minister, why are you protecting Mark Loquan? Why? And then we come to the biggest national betrayal, Petrotrin. This government must never be forgiven for putting out the light at Petrotrin. This government must never be forgiven for the dismay and despair they caused through their betrayal of shutting down Petrotrin. Remember, the government is not closing down Petrotrin. And if you were closing your fridge door, I repeat, the government is not closing down Petrotrin. That from the Honorable Prime Minister. And shortly thereafter, all, closed down all. They never presented a single report, a single expert reason or proper rationale. Yet with the stroke of a pen, they put tens of thousands on the breadline. They destroy the fence line communities. They remove our fuel and forex security and weaken our energy sector. For the last year, we have heard not a single plan about the reopening of this refinery, but before election, Mama Guy, fooling people, going to sell it to OWTU. Election come and gone, what's happening now? Not a word. Maybe the new Minister of Energy will tell us what's the plan for Petrotrin, the refinery down, that was Petrotrin refinery. They have abandoned the refinery to become scrap metal. Now with this budget, we're hearing rumors again, we're getting a buyer, we're going to sell it. That is old talk. The Petrotrin buying scrap iron. But I think the scrap iron dealers are asking to be able to buy the scrap iron. The Petrotrin closure is just a confirmation that nothing this government says can be trusted. I turn now to agriculture. Very, very important sector with respect to having food security for our country. This sector continues to receive total neglect by this Rowley-led government. The impudence of the Minister of Finance is truly remarkable, as he once again presented pie-in-the-sky promises to farmers. I will just deal with a few of the matters on this portfolio. and our shadow person will pick it up. One of the matters that continues to be of most pressing challenge the farmers are facing has to do with land tenure. Yet nothing has been done to alleviate these problems. This government seems incapable of understanding the problems regarding ownership of land. $20 million has been allocated in the budget to develop lands at Caroni and Orange Grove by the AMBD. No money has been allocated under this ministry for development of agricultural lands in other parts of the country, such as at Orange Grove, at Caroni. The minister's access road repair program to cover 80 kilometers of road excluded the entire south and central part of the country. These are major agricultural areas. Is this again geographic discrimination, geographic apartheid? The agricultural incentives program has been decreased by $12.1 million. Because of this neglect, farmers and citizens are the ones left to suffer. So imagine you invest as a farmer heavily with little or no assistance from government. You prepare your land, you plant your land, you maintain your crops, and then what happens? They all washed away in a flood due to the government's incompetence. And then to be sold dreams of receiving compensation never materializes when all these things are washed away. We look at the flooding and draining issues. It is alarming that the Minister of Finance did not mention flooding at least once in his presentation, because flooding is a threat year after year. In recent times, this flooding has expanded into areas that traditionally never flooded, and so we were alligators in the murky lagoon. That's where the flooding was, one minister said. Well, now the flooding is across the island, throughout the land. In fiscal 2021, only $2.8 million was spent to upgrade existing drainage pumps and gate inventory. No wonder we have such massive flooding in agricultural areas throughout the country. In fiscal 21, Ministry of Works and Transport, listen to this, allocated $51 million under the DP program for flooding and irrigation. Out of that, you know how much was spent? $29.5 million was spent. Where the other half going? What did you do with it? And all the flooding continuing. While the government's new mantra is to blame climate change for flooding, it is really their neglect that results in this catastrophe. For agriculture, still on agriculture, pre-deal larceny. My office has received complaints from farmers all over the country of the lack of resources available for the pre-deal larceny squad to carry out their duties effectively. The major underlying issue is that of enforcement, as the squad lacks sufficient staff, trained personnel, equipment, and resources. In 2021, one would think that technology such as drones would be utilized to provide surveillance. However, we are told that some of the units do not even have functional vehicles or something as simple as a battery for the patrol vessel to carry out their function. And all the ministers spend so much time on Prime Minister's created a new ministry talking about digitization. The people don't even have a battery to put in the car, in the vehicle, to do their job. I remember the hypocrisy of this government, when community activists in Ahokata initiated a program called Project Hope in an effort to boost agriculture in the community, to get more young persons involved. It was met with immediate disdain from none other than the Prime Minister himself. You know what he called it? He called the program pak choy politics. Well, people eat that, Prime Minister. People do eat it. Senator Jiranjan and a team in Lahokata developed grow box systems which successfully attracted dozens of youth from the community, thereby giving them an opportunity to make an honest livelihood and provide food for their families. That was criticized by the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister really lacks, or cannot seem to understand about agriculture, because once again, we see in this budget presentation the lack of foresight of how to boost the agricultural sector. And you recall when the Prime Minister told this country, we can't do agriculture, we don't have enough land. Didn't know the technology now. You could grow food in water. You could do vertical, go up in the air. I have some of those in my yard. vertical farming with Karaili vines, yes, and same, the vines, cucumbers and so on. Vertical, go up in the air. If you don't have space on the ground, you go vertical. So no understanding of agriculture, the importance of food security for the people of Trinidad and Tobago. I will speak now a bit on the health sector, madam. This government boasted about being #1 in the world, the best in the Commonwealth for health, and yet they choose to go abroad to get treatment. It's hard to believe 6 years ago this nation was on the brink of establishing a vibrant health tourism sector with the COVID Children's Hospital. Imagine it took a global pandemic for this government to open the doors to that fully equipped COVID Children's Hospital. I know we invested very heavily in health. We invested heavily in that hospital, specifically for children, with intentions of it becoming a flagship facility, encouraging and boosting medical tourism. This would have been a pilot of a new and upcoming industry that had the potential to create thousands of new jobs, as well as boosting and diversifying our economy. Knowing that we're a fully equipped hospital and only needed to be staffed, it was purposely kept closed, and I can only say that is political spite and malice. That shows you the kind of people we are dealing with here today. They have no issue with letting people die if it suits their political purposes. When we consider the pressures that the entire health sector is under on a normal day pre-COVID, it is alarming to note how little investment was made into bolstering the sector since then. Up to today, citizens have to wait months for a CT scan or an MRI. They have sat back and refused to open hospitals, as I say, out of bad mind. Yet they're coming now to parade up and down, opening facilities that we started that took you years to build and finish. Some of these are Point Fortin Hospital. Don't forget the Scarborough Hospital, man. Don't forget that. Completed under my government. Scarborough Hospital. We take ownership of it. The Rima Hospital, the Couva Children's Hospital, the numerous health centers across the country that we refurbished and upgraded. Because of their bad mind, it seems, towards the population, they failed to utilize all the infrastructure we left behind, thereby weakening our already burdened health system. They allowed it to sit and rot instead of utilizing them for the good health of people. So many are of the opinion that our health sector was purposely sabotaged by this government. All the P&M have built were some tents that they got donated from the US military. That's all they built. Imagine that some tents are the most that they built after spending over 15 billion in 6 years. So we were at a severe disadvantage because of bad mind, I see. They must admit it. Did they sabotage our health system after the election? If nothing else, COVID has shown us the deplorable state of our health sector. It was bad before, and we all knew this, but COVID forced the world to see what incompetence we have to deal with here. And then they were using a fake report to say we were #1 in the world. Fake report, you all remember that? Fake report to say we were #1 in the world. The people who did that report literally put a disclaimer saying that this report was not to be used as a gauge of nation's policy effectiveness. But this government used it regardless, because the truth is something so distant for them. So where did the money go? Look at the millions we got from the World Bank to fight the pandemic. This is a recent quote from the World Bank, dated July 8, 2020. The World Bank approved US $20 million for the Trinidad and Tobago COVID-19 Emergency Response Project to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic and strengthen national systems for public health preparedness. I asked today, where did that money go? What was it spent on? More wasting of every single dollar they get. Then we have a Minister of Health who went on a comedy show for everyone to laugh at him, and he thinks some big TV star, some big Sawati. The health sector was doomed the minute they placed a bush doctor like Ian Alleyne to head such a ministry. With education, there is so much wrong with how this government has treated the children of our beloved nation. I make no apologies for saying that our nation's children have always been close to my heart. Anyone who knows me knows that, and that is why it breaks my heart to see how this government treats with our children and our educators. For yet another year, education and training has been promised the largest allocation in the budget, with a budgeted expenditure of $6.9 billion for fiscal 2022. Last year, the budgeted figure was $7.97 billion, and in the year previous, 2019, $7.5 billion, so always the largest allocations. In fact, if the minister had actually spent what was allocated, or if it had been dispersed to that ministry, to this crucial sector, then over the 6-year period they've been in government, education would have been benefiting from government investment of $47.2 billion. That would have been invested in the children of our nation. Do you know what that works out to be? That works out to be more than $134,000 per child of school age. For that kind of money, our children should have been sitting in first world education facilities, learning in an interactive IT-supported e-learning environment, textbooks on their laptops, attending classes in upgraded schools with the best facilities and well-trained teaching and support staff. Children would have been able to choose from a wide variety of career paths and access certified education, comparable with the best that the rest of the world has to offer. But wait, that was my vision. That is what we were working towards. The P&M version is what we are stuck with today after 6 years. It breaks my heart to see schools paid for by taxpayers left to rot, overgrown with bushes, inhabited by snakes and rats and vermin and vandals because of the bad mind of this government. In my own constituency every day I get complaints from parents that the government has refused to complete the Shiva Boys College and the Parvati Girls College. They were both almost completed 6 years ago. They were almost completed. The government has refused to complete those schools. Why are you suffering the children? Why are you suffering the children? Throughout the country, thousands of children continue to struggle to use their parents' cell phone to get onto the online classes. Thousands more simply have no access to devices. They have to depend on photocopied work. So you can imagine my shock to discover that last year, while our children suffered, the Minister of Education did not spend $4.7 million allocated for the purpose of acquiring and distributing laptops and tablets. Did not spend it. And when I checked the prices, you know how much laptops devices you could have bought? That could have bought almost 10,000 devices. 10,000 devices. We were told that there are over 60,000 children still without devices. Why do you hate our children? Why do you suffer them that way? There were 79,000 children in the school feeding program before COVID. The ministry and this government knew that these children were living in difficult circumstances. That's why they were in the school feeding program in the first place. And it has been made worse because many of their parents have lost their jobs. How did the government reach out to ensure that these children were able to receive at least one meal a day? At least one meal a day. You have condemned a generation of children to no sustainable future. Coming to the end. The Rowley P&M government's housing policy, I turn to housing, has been nothing short of atrocious. The policy confusion has been acute. The lack of implementation is pathetic, and the suffering of the most vulnerable distressing. But, as we say, elections have consequences. And there will be no end in sight to the misery faced by the poor and deserving citizens in desperate need of shelter. The obscene realization that this government will do nothing except promise pie-in-the-sky projects came at page 76, when after tedious repetition of the same old projects, the Minister of Finance dropped his voice and slumped lower to whisper, "Madam Speaker, the upcoming demand for funding requirements will far exceed our ability to meet the required demand." That's the Minister admitting that, you know. That they wouldn't be able to meet the demand. They wouldn't be able to perform. What he meant to say was, we have no money, so nothing will happen. That's what that means. The manifest abandonment of the construction sector, the engine of any economic revitalization strategy, could be found in the details. When we look at the IDF, Infrastructure Development Fund, 228 of that program, in the estimates, we confront a hypocrisy and deception when it comes to housing. Unbelievable. They have budgeted $0 for the accelerated housing project. They have budgeted $0 for the accelerated housing project. I wonder what the Minister of Housing has to say about this. Why are you all treating the girl like that? Why have you given her some money to build some houses? Have you built any houses since you came into office? In the 6 years you've been there? A misnomer, if ever there was one. Accelerated housing program. $0 allocated. They budget $0 for that program. How can you build one single home when you budget not a cent for this accelerated housing program? This is proof of hypocrisy and deception by this government. They shamefully talk about home construction while they budget $0 to build houses. The Ministry of Housing is being run like a parlor. There's nothing under the ministry, as if it was a plan to ensure that the minister was their only name. The public-private partnerships administered under the Ministry of Finance and the $25 million allocated under the Ministry for Finance last year for this purpose was only $5 million. And you come back again with more private-public partnerships. You have put only $5 million in your allocation. What do you expect any different results? I turn to public utilities, madam. And this ministries are so vital because everybody, or the majority of people, use electricity, and almost everyone uses water. Everyone uses water. Government has boldly signaled that utility rates will be increased in the near future. At a recent meeting of the JSC on land and physical infrastructure, the acting CEO of WASA stated that property tax will drive water rates up because water rates are calculated at annual taxable value. So, property tax is going to send your water rates up. That is said by the CEO of WASA. TNTEC and the Ministry of Energy, through the Cabinet Subcommittee on Energy, have completed the negotiations. So, what's going to happen there? These prices are expected to go up, and TNTEC is already indebted to NGC to the tune of $4 billion. So you're going to get property tax going up on you. You go in and get WASA rates on you. You go in and get TNTEC rates on you. That's a triple whammy. That's a triple blow to people who are already suffering, already under stress and under pressure. So, the bottom line is that despite the harsh economic climate, the suffering, the poverty rates, this will bring greater poverty and more suffering. In light of all this, many consumers pay water rates and receive a very poor supply of water. Under my administration, over 75% of the country had a regular water supply. Today, there are protests, bucket brigades, and dry taps. By the Minister's own admission in the budget statement, page 111, several projects were completed in the last financial year to bring about a greater supply of water to beneficiaries. Now, I am very happy for the areas the Minister listed for those projects having been completed. And out of all those, only one of these was in an opposition constituency. Only one. 99% of the projects by the minister identified were all held in P&M constituencies. Again, is this geographical apartheid, geographical discrimination? Is the minister and his government saying that the people of Diego Martin and Point 14 are more equal than the people of my own constituency in Superior? Are they more equal? Less equal? The government continue, my constituency, they have had no water for weeks in certain areas of my constituency. Government continues to carry their politics of spite, malice, and geographic discrimination. Instead of increasing the capacity of WASA's infrastructure, we have, wow, thank you, we have, my colleague is just showing me how much time I have left. And Madam, as I told you, I did not intend to make any long, boring speech. So I think we'll all be very happy to hear that I'm coming to the end of my contribution. So, instead of increasing WASA's capacity, we have been over 100 million in cuts to materials and supplies. Government does not have the political will to fix the problems at WASA. Are these cuts a part of a plan to further emasculate and demonize WASA? Contract employment at WASA has now been cut by over $232 million under the line item in the estimates of expenditure, recurrent expenditure. Is this another part of the plan to drive WASA into the ground and then for government to come in as a savior? We have seen this playbook at Petrotrin. While the Minister of Finance regaled us about WASA completing its transformational plan, the Minister told us nothing, not one project, earmarked to address the crisis affecting several constituencies across the country because of aging infrastructure and leakages. On the fiscal measures, the Minister of Finance announced the increase of rebates from 25% to 35% for customers whose bills are $300 inclusive of VAT or less. He said that about 210,000 households will benefit. But these rebates are an attempt to appear as though government has compassion for the poor and downtrodden. In reality, they are giving with one hand and taking with the next hand. Because when the rates are revised, how many of these households will now have a bill over $300 and therefore not entitled to any rebate? So give with one hand, take with the other hand, left hand, right hand. When the rates are revised, regarding impending review to the tariffs, this will have a severe impact on persons currently receiving rebates because many of them are now come to fall over the $300 bracket based on the new prices. The Minister knows this, and therefore, I know he used to tell me this from time to time when I'm in the Parliament in the past, he's playing smart with foolishness. That's what he's doing. On pages 160 and 161 of the statement, Minister indicated that cash card program would be administered by the Ministry of Public Utilities. That's a strange thing, you know. Is this going to be like another P&M slush fund, where P&M supporters receive the majority of cards, like what they do with other resources of the state? What will be the criteria to access these utility cash cards and fuel cards? Would it be a P&M party card, as we saw in the past? And why on earth did the Minister not provide a timeline for the introduction of these cards? And why on earth is the Minister of Public Utilities heading a fuel cash card? How come Utilities is giving out a fuel cash card? That should have been, I think, the new Minister of Energy. Fuel cash card, how is it going through the Minister? Why? Is that a typo as well? I can't say. The RSC is at its final stage of determining water and electricity rates. This requires public consultations. However, When you look at the estimates, there is no allocation for the hosting of any public consultations. No allocations whatsoever. Under that line item, there is nothing, zero. So how are they going to hold these public consultations? Or is that they will come up with their determinations in secret? How? By the phone? By Zoom? How is it going to be done? Because there is no money allocated for this line item, none. I turn now to this very important ministry, the new ministry. This ministry was created this year, 2021, last year, 2020. Digital transformation ministry created last year. That involves the integration of digital technology in all areas of operations. This is one area that there were a lot of expectations and hope that could have provided a sustainable avenue for job creation, business development, and the creation of new technologies. Instead, the Minister of Finance was short on timelines, plans, roadmaps, and details. Instead, several of the minister's grandiose announcements were repeat projects closed under the guise of different names with remodeled descriptions. The Minister of Finance stood with a straight face, as we say. In local parlance, we would say, and he hit the copy and paste button when he reached this particular ministry. I want to ask the minister, if this government is serious about ICTs, why then did the 20 million allocated for implementation of ICT plan in the last fiscal year only see $995,000 spent? 20 million allocated because it's such a vital sector, especially in this pandemic time, the ICT sector. Why is it you only spent $995,560 when you had an allocation of 20 million? Why? Why? Has the plan been shelved? Has the plan collapsed? Or like everything else, P&M promises never materialize. Government has touted e-legislative agenda to support electronic transactions, and the minister was brass-faced enough to raise this in his contribution. This is coming from a government who passed regulations for being fined for not wearing a mask in 2020, and in 2021 there was no way, no medium to make these payments for the persons to pay the fines. I think, again, not making any sense. Page 13 of last year's budget presentation mirrored similar announcements made by the minister in that year's budget. The minister last year spoke about an electronic window for business operations and government services. This year, we have another repeated promise of harmonizing all government services with very little results from last year to this year. Minister in his presentation spoke about the ease of doing business index being compromised. However, if we were to use the minister's own words on page 29 of his last budget, under diversification, the minister admits, then he admitted, it takes 10 days to start a business, 254 days for receiving construction permits, 61 days to obtain electricity, 77 days to register property, 65 days to obtain credit, 3.5 years to enforce a contract, 2.5 years to resolve insolvency. And then the Minister of Trade came here and boasted about a host of things that were going to be done to improve our ease of doing business. Well, which one of this has changed? What has changed? We all know that when you sell a car in 2016, it takes you up to 2021 and still not registered, still not transferred. Still not transferred. So, what has changed with the ease of doing business? And you know what I find is the most hilarious? The most hilarious. This brand new Ministry of Digitization. Digitization. Do you know? They do not even have a website. They do not have a website. And you in charge of digital of this drive? How can that be? You don't have a website. It isn't, you know, if it, as they say, if you don't laugh, you'll cry. It is ludicrous. It is ludicrous. You don't have a website in this ministry. So we were trying to find out where is the address of this ministry. And that's how we went up on the website. I told one of my staff, I said, check the website. It is still listed under the Ministry of Public Admin and Digitization. So it's just a word, a fancy buzzword once more. I turn out to Tobago. There is nothing in the budget to sustain Tobago. For a man who touts Tobago heritage, this Prime Minister has consistently treated the people of Tobago with nothing but contempt. How can we ever forget the hell he put people through when he and his Minister of Works and Transport infamously crashed the inter-island ferry service? We cannot forgive him for the notorious Sandals scandal. When this government wanted to get their hands on the assets from Clico, like no man's land, so they could sell it to Sandals, the sitting central bank governor turned a blind eye to his statutory and fiduciary obligations to Clico policyholders. Today, the Sandals deal has collapsed, but no one in this land knows what has happened to no man's land. No one knows what has happened to no man's land. Remember, it is no man's land. What has happened? You remember it was transferred out of the purview of the central bank under this government. In breach of the Central Bank Act, it was transferred to the office of the Prime Minister and for Sandals. Boko Reef, I think it was called, there was a company. Now we have no sandals, we have no shoes, we have no slippers, and now we have no man's land. Where has it gone? All citizens, especially the people of Tobago, deserve to know from this Prime Minister what happened to this $100 million asset which was last vested under the Prime Minister's portfolio. The last we knew, no man's land was in Golden Grove Boko Company Limited. And that company has been defunct. They last filed their annual returns to the company's registry 2 years ago. So where is this land? In whom is it vested? Is it vested in a company that has failed to file its annual returns with the company's registry? The Prime Minister displayed contempt for the people of Tobago by his disregard of the will of the electorate in the January 21 THA election. Existing law to break the deadlock. But the Rowley-led government instructed the EBC via unnecessary amendments to the law to change the law. That is
Speaker,
evidence
Madam Speaker,
of the
53(1)(e), please.
The opposition leaders assured us it's not going to be much longer. Please, let's hear the opposition leader. Continue, ma'am.
Thank you, madam. Thank you very much. So there was existing law to break the deadlock. Instead, they went in their quest for self-governed. They went in defiance of that election and the existing law to come to this House to change the law, to create these 15 seats. And contrary to what somebody in Tobago say about it, don't have nobody living on the ridge, nobody living there. Well, I think a constituent from that area, one of the seats, has indeed filed a matter in the court before they, or is in the process of filing a matter before the court. So that was just total nonsense about on the ridge that the MP for Baratara San Juan didn't know that no one was living there when there are thousands of people living in that particular area. So we're not buying that. We're not buying that. We are not buying that. We'll let the court decide. And you know, what is surprising,
Members, let's get on with it, please.
thank you. You know, Miss, what is surprising now, that some view those amendments as a quest by the government to really gerrymander the seats and deny the will of the people of Tobago. They have now named a date for the THA election. This is the second election in 1 year. And it's ironic, given that the Davis South Electoral District in the Penal Davis Regional Corporation has been vacant for 7 months now. 7 months. 2 elections in Tobago in 1 year, none for Davis South. After 7 months, they have no elected representative. Yesterday, I wrote a pre-action protocol letter to the Attorney General asking why no date has been set and calling for the issuance of a writ of election. So I await a reply. So you can't say that you have COVID, so you can't hold that PDRC election, but you're going to Tobago to hold a second election. So we sent you the pre-action letter and we await your response, Mr. Attorney General. I can't leave Tobago without talking about the hotels. The government is promising all these pie-in-the-sky projects to bamboozle voters, perhaps. Among this regime's most recent exhibitions of disdain for Tobago is a plan for a $500 million Marriott hotel in Rocky Point. People cannot get food. People are not traveling. The hotels are empty, even the existing ones. You want to build 5 hotels? Not one, 5 hotels this government wants to build. Nation of bellboys. People cannot get food, as I say. 5 hotels. Hotels for whom? The Prime Minister built a multi-million-dollar home for himself in Tobago, paid for by taxpayers' dollars. Now they want to build multi-million-dollar hotels. And this time, you're constructing a hotel at the height of a global pandemic, where international travel is already severely curtailed. So who's going to come and stay at these 5 hotels? Instead of assisting local hoteliers and guest house owners who are lamenting the loss of income due to the ongoing closure of beaches and lack of airlift, government is bringing in competition. What are the government's plans for Tobago? Just build some hotels or build a zip line? What are your plans? Build a zip line. Where is the zip line? Not built yet. And same way these hotels will come crashing down, just like the Sanders scandal, because you're granting incentives and so on. These will come crashing down too. And there will be none of these fancy things that you're promising now in an election season. We in the UNC have always respected our sister I.A.N as an equal partner in development. And we have trusted and supported the people of Tobago in regulating their affairs without interference from Trinidad. Under the government I led, I am proud to say Tobago saw unprecedented growth and prosperity. And our person shadowing Tobago matters will go into more details about those. So ma'am, I come now. I have spent some time in delving down into the budget statement. And I would like to say, that's not all I would like to do. I would like to share some of our plans to rebuild and restore Trinidad and Tobago. It is clear that our country is in a deep crisis. It is also clear that this government does not have a clue how to manage the economy or lead us out of the abyss into which they have sunk us. As we have done in the past, the United National Congress can and will rescue our nation. This is not just old talk. We have a record of growing the economy, generating revenue, and creating jobs. Today, as always, we stand ready with a plan to rebuild our economy and restore stability. We did it before, and we are ready to get the job done again. Unlike this government, whose only idea is to tax, borrow, and spend, we have practical solutions for revenue generation and job creation. Our strategy for recovery, sustainable growth, and diversification of TNT's economy is built on 5 interconnected principles. And I've noticed recently the Minister of Finance has stolen this from us. Well, not stolen, plagiarized this from us. Principle 1, people-centered development. getting people back to work. Principle 2, pro-business. Allow the private sector to drive growth and development. Principle 3, deepen economic reforms but with a human face. Principle 4, local content. Give people a sense of ownership and independence. Principle 5, sustainability. Promoting environmental stewardship. The UNC's National Economic Transformation Master Plan, I'll share some of that with you. The UNC has spoken to the people. We've consulted people. We've consulted with experts and professionals. And we have developed what we believe is a solid and sustainable National Economic Transformation Master Plan to rescue and restore TNT. The new UNC Master Plan lays out a comprehensive suite of policy initiatives and programs to steer the economy towards a more sustainable development path. Our plan will create 50,000 new jobs. We did it before without a new tax, and we will do it again. We will focus heavily on diversification and new business development so that people and country alike can benefit. Let's look at some of our prosperity engines, which is really aimed at diversification to grow more revenue streams and to create forex and to create jobs. On the most pressing issue of diversification, those opposite have spent their time doing nothing but talking. Indeed, over the last 5 years, the Prime Minister has displayed irritation and annoyance when confronted with the need to diversify the economy and develop new revenue streams. We must look elsewhere for economic sustainability. Now more than ever, with the collapsed economy, we must focus on new revenue streams and not just taxes. Taxes and borrowings have been the only source of revenue for this government, apart from raiding the HSF that we built up. We have identified several prosperity engines to create new jobs, transform our economy, and create more revenue. Brechin Castle Agro-Processing Complex, a sugar manufacturing facility, an East-West Corridor Biotechnology Manufacturing Corridor, Sevilla Digital Innovation Park, Tamana Solar Tech Renewable Energy, West Port of Spain Trini Creative Arts Street and Area, East Port of Spain Steel Pan Manufacturing Facility. And you know, I have mentioned this before, and the member for Laventil, Minister Hines, got up and said, no, we have that already. We have that already. What we have is a very small private enterprise. We are talking about East Port of Spain Steel Pan Manufacturing Facility. I mean, look at this. We are the inventors of the only, what do you call it, percussion instrument, in whichever century, 21st century. And we had to buy steel pan from other people, but we should be exporting steel pan all over the world. This is ours, it is homegrown, it is indigenous, we are proud of it, we should be selling these pans. And that was what that was about. We'll talk about a Piarco Aircraft Maintenance Repair and Operations Hub. Piarco Aircraft Maintenance Repair and Operations Hub, again to create jobs, to bring in more revenue, to grow the economy. That's what these are for. A Cedrus Maruga Southwest Peninsula Economic Zone. Point Galiota Energy Logistics Hub. Plymouth International Cruise Ship Marina Complex. Making Tobago a duty-free zone. Port of Spain Port revitalization, not leasing away the port and giving it away to your friends and financiers and family. That's not what that was. That's not what that is. These prosperity engines will mobilize and engage the private sector, both local and international, and their implementation will have larger positive multiplier effects in kickstarting the economic recovery, fostering growth, and supporting transformation. What is needed is a government and a leader and leaders who will put their shoulders to the wheel, a government that will see the private sector and stakeholders as partners in the process of development. I am confident in the will and ability of our people to adapt to these challenges and to seize opportunities as we have demonstrated in the past. As I wrap up my contribution, I again reiterate that this budget is a declaration of war on the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. Madam Speaker, if you permit me, I would like to congratulate our sister CARICOM nation and the Prime Minister of Barbados, Mia Mottley, for the position she has assumed at the United Nations. So as I say, this budget is a declaration of war on the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago. But this is a war that the PNM, the Rowley-led government, will lose, because the people of Trinidad and Tobago have declared war on the PNM. Our nation will fight back against this government. We in the opposition will hold every single one of you to account. None of you will escape. I think people in our land, they're singing the song and have the words saying, "Don't mistake our kindness for weakness." Those who perpetrate plans against the people of TNT to dehumanize us, to impoverish children, to tax upon tax for persons without jobs, those who sit in high towers whilst all around them our people are begging for food, I say your days are numbered. In Trinidad and Tobago, democracy and justice will always prevail against the forces of oppression. When you sit in a cabinet which makes decisions to punish the very people who put you there, you have broken the essential social contract to do all that can be done to make our country a better place. You have turned your backs on the vulnerable. You are abusing our children by not providing proper tools for education. You are destroying jobs and livelihoods. And you continue to support something which you may not understand is much bigger than yourselves. That this Rowley-led government is slashing and burning our beloved country to the ground. And a few amongst you are funneling the monies from the Treasury through rentals and brothers' banks and rental properties and wives' legal briefs and so on. The public does not support you. They will have their day and they will have their say. I say to the good people of Trinidad and Tobago, never be disheartened. What is done in the darkness will come to light, and we are seeing it. We are seeing indemnity agreements popping up in the public domain. We are seeing car transfers popping up. All kinds of things are just popping up. What is done in the darkness will come to light. It will come to the light. And when I say we will fight you and we declare war on you today, I say we declare war on you today, I am talking about political war. I am not inciting any whatever. It's not sedition. I'm talking about political war. As I said, we will fight you in the parliament. We will fight you outside the parliament. We'll fight you on the pavement and everywhere that we can. Legally and constitutionally, we will do that. I say it will not be the first time that when a PNM government falls, the UNC has to come and fix the country. We have done so in the past, and we are ready now again. The UNC will restore and rebuild our nation. Madam Speaker, I wish to share with you that I wear pink today in recognition of Breast Cancer Awareness Month, and I urge others to be so aware to support that recognition. I want to thank you all and thank the honourable members of this House for affording me the opportunity to speak here today. Thank you very much.
Honorable members, this House is now suspended and shall resume at 1:20 p.m.